Hello everyone! Cross-generational battles are always interesting. I've already done a video on Mikhail Tal's game against Garry Kasparov, and I covered the game where Mikhail Tal played against Vishwanathan Anand. And here we also have a rare treat. 13 or 14-year-old Magnus Carlsen is playing against the legendary Viktor Korchnoi. The game was played in 2004. It was a tournament called SmartFish Chess Masters. It was played in Norway, and 10 players participated in this tournament. I will tell you something about the results and the standings after I show you the game. Viktor here opens the game with c4, the English opening. We have knight to f6, knight to c3, and c5, so the symmetrical variation of the English. g3, e6, and knight to f3. Knight to c6, bishop to g2, and d5 by Carlsen. C captures, e captures, and d4. Bishop to e7 by Carlsen, and bishop to e3. And this looks like a weird move. Why would you play something like this to block your own e2 pawn? But the Viktor actually has a pretty good idea. c4 by Carlsen, and this seems like a reasonable response. You want to lock this pawn on d4, not allow Viktor to capture on c5, and now definitely this bishop does look suspicious on e3. But Korchnoi plays knight to e5, and now you see that this knight is very strong on e5. Even though, you know, it's always hard to get rid of a knight, a white knight on e5, but now there's really no way to get rid of it. Even if you tried something like moving the f6 knight and maybe pushing f6, that would only ruin your king's pawn structure. But capturing is definitely not recommended. If you capture, then after d captures, you can't go to d7, you lose the d5 pawn, and if you try something like knight to g4 to maybe mess up white's pawn structure, then this bishop can come to d4, and now it's pretty good. For example, bishop to e6, and now h3, the knight has only one square to go, h6, and for example g4, white is all ready to push f4, f5. It's a very pleasant position for white. So after this knight to e5, Carlsen castles. Viktor also castles, and here bishop to e6 was played. And this was a small inaccuracy that allowed Viktor a very nice tactic. Better yet was either developing the rook, maybe pushing h6, but if you want to develop the bishop, maybe a better square would have been f5. But okay, Carlsen goes for bishop to e6, and here he allows Viktor this knight captures on c4 move. You pretty much have to capture the knight, otherwise you're down a pawn, so d captures on c4, and now d5 by Viktor, attacking the knight and the bishop. Here Carlsen captures, knight captures on d5, we have knight captures on d5, and now bishop to f6, attacking the b2 pawn, and Viktor simply plays queen to d2, defending the b2 pawn. Bishop to d4 by Carlsen, and what's the idea behind bishop to d4? Well, if you capture it, then Carlsen can capture on d5. The queen is no longer attacking the d5 square. So after bishop to d4, knight to f4 by Korchnoi. Bishop captures on e3, queen captures on e3, and rook to e8. Rook f to d1, attacking the queen. Queen moves to f6, and now again Carlsen is attacking the b2 pawn. And here Korchnoi gives up the bishop, bishop captures on c6, b captures on c6, and queen to d4, offering a trade of queens. Queen captures, rook captures, and bishop to d5. And if you look at this position now, it's definitely a better position for white. Carlsen has these weird double c pawns, but can Korchnoi actually do something about it? It's hard to say. This e2 pawn is attacked by the rook. Okay, for now it's protected by the knight, but if knight ever wants to capture it, he will have to move the knight. So rook a to d1. Korchnoi first doubles up on the d file, and here Carlsen has to find some kind of a plan. Either start improving the position of his own king, or something. Start expanding on the queen side. But here Carlsen actually plays c3. With the idea that if b captures on c3, he will capture with the bishop on a2. But this actually isn't bad for white. Korchnoi can simply capture on c3, and after bishop captures, rook to a1, and now Carlsen is the one that has two isolated pawns, and it's hard to say if he will be able to defend them against Korchnoi's rooks. But after this c3 move, Korchnoi played knight captures on d5 immediately, and this wins a pawn by force. C captures on d5 and B captures on c3. Now Carlsen does grab back the e2 pawn, rook captures on e2, but now rook captures on d5, and Carlsen doesn't have time to capture on a2 because rook to d8 will lead to checkmate after rook captures and the other rook captures. So g6, Carlsen has to make some room, breathing room for the king, and rook f5 to d2, now protecting the a2 pawn and also offering a trade of rooks. Other than this move, probably a4 is also a valid consideration, but it's hard to say which move is better. Is white better here while there are 4 rooks on the board, or is white better if he trades off a pair of rooks? Korchnoi decides to trade off one pair of rooks, so rook captures, and if anyone in the world was famous for his endgame skill, then it was Viktor Korchnoi, and I don't think he had any doubts that he would win this against young Magnus Carlsen. So rook to c8 by Carlsen, rook to c2, protecting the passed pawn, and now rook to c4, not allowing Korchnoi to push this passed pawn any further. So king to f1, now both players will start improving the position of their kings, king to f8, king to e2, king to e7, king to d3, and rook to a4. And here rook to d2 was played. It's very hard for Korchnoi to actually improve his position. This rook is cutting off the 4th rank. This rook has to keep protecting the a2 pawn. The king can't go further, so probably a better idea than rook to d2 would maybe be to push c4 and then cut off the rook and then maybe grab more space by the king. But there's no rush in doing this. First Korchnoi plays rook to d2, king to e6, and now c4. Rook to a3 check, king goes further up the board, king to e4, and h5 here. We have f4, f6, and rook to e2. Rook to a4, king to d4, defending the pawn, king to d6, and rook to f2 now. Here Korchnoi would very much enjoy pushing f5, either to capture on g6, or if Carlsen captures, then he will break up this pawn structure and create 2 more isolated pawns. This would be excellent for white. So Carlsen has to defend this. He plays rook to a5 and king to c3. King to c5, now king to b3, not allowing rook to check the king on a3. Rook to a6, and in this position Korchnoi played rook to d2, and Carlsen lost the game on time. So Korchnoi won this game, and I read somewhere that at one point in the game Carlsen left the board and he forgot to hit the clock, so his time was running while it was actually still his move, but he didn't know that. I couldn't confirm this, so if anyone knows if this is true or has some article that would prove this, please do share in the comments. I will add it in the description. But if not, I mean, even if that was the case, that's not Victor's fault. You have to hit the clock. That's otherwise you're gonna run out of time and lose. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. As you all know, Viktor Korchnoi died last year in June in 2016 at the age of 85, and I think in his entire chess career he defeated 9 world champions. And Carlsen wasn't a world champion at the time this game was played, but he managed to take down one more future world champion. So yeah. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Aaron Wolflart, Kevin Keith, and Lucas Robinson for contribution to my channel. Lucas contributed the amount that Morphy declined after winning the first American Chess Congress, so thank you a lot, very thoughtful of you. And I told you I will say something about the results and the standings. This was actually one of Carlsen's worst tournaments he ever played. Out of 10 players, he won shared last place, but in the end he was last in this tournament. Antoneta Stefanova was 9th. The tournament was won by Alexei Shirov, second was Peter Hein Nielsen, Carlsen's tutor, and third place was Luke McShane. So yeah, not the best tournament for Carlsen, but in a year from this tournament he will be able to defeat anyone he ever faces, so it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I would like to thank you for following my Twitch channel. After yesterday's announcement, I already received like 650 follows, so that's like huge. Thank you very much. And thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you soon.